Let's talk about a truly towering figure from the 15th century, Don Isaac Abravanel. Now, his story isn't just some dusty piece of history, it's this incredible, dramatic bridge between the old medieval world of faith and our modern world of finance, politics, and, believe it or not, critical thinking.
His whole life, his entire legacy, really boils down to this one shocking question. How does one of the most powerful and trusted men in Europe, an advisor to kings, become a wandering, homeless refugee? Let's unpack that.
To really feel the impact of his fall, you first have to understand just how high he climbed. So we're going to start with Abravanel at the absolute peak of his power and influence.
I mean, this guy wasn't just near power. He was a central gear in the engine room of 15th century Iberia. We're talking about a man who managed enormous sums of money, handled super-sensitive diplomatic missions. He was deeply woven into the fabric of the Christian elite, serving royalty in Portugal and later the famous Catholic monarchs in Spain.
And get this, these are his own words, written later, looking back on his life from the ruins. It's this incredibly raw self-critique. He's basically blaming his own ambition, the fact that he got so caught up in worldly affairs for the catastrophe that was about to hit him.
And that catastrophe has a name, 1492. A year that didn't just shatter Abravanel's world, but completely changed the course of history for the largest Jewish community in all of Europe.
Just look at the speed of this. It's breathtaking. In January, the Reconquista ends with the fall of Granada. Just 2 months later, Ferdinand and Isabella sign the Edict of Expulsion, and by July, it's over. An entire society, centuries old, is just uprooted in the blink of an eye.
3 months. That's it. That was the window. Europe's largest, most established Jewish community was given 3 months to either convert to Christianity, get out of the country, or face death. Abravanel, using all his influence, actually begged the monarchs to reverse it, but their minds were made up.
So this forces an impossible choice. A lot of his peers, other influential Jewish courtiers, they converted. It was a way to save their positions, their homes, their wealth. But Abravanel, at 55 years old, chose exile. He literally walked away from everything he had spent a lifetime building.
But here's the twist. This unimaginable personal and communal tragedy, it became the very thing that forged his greatest legacy. Think about it. He's stripped of his wealth, his status. He's wandering from Naples to Corfu to Venice. And what does he do? He turns to writing. This incredible burst of creativity, born from total trauma, is what he's most remembered for today. He used the power of his intellect to try and rebuild a world that had been shattered by force.
And look at the toolkit he brought to the job. This is amazing. He wasn't just a theologian. He was this incredibly eclectic thinker, pulling from philosophy, history, political science, psychology, even astrology, to try and create a new way for his scattered community to understand what had just happened to them.
And all these different interests, they really point to this fascinating duality at the very heart of who Abravanel was. The guy truly had a foot in 2 completely different worlds. So on one hand, you have the traditional medieval rabbi. This quote right here shows his core belief, a deep, unshakable faith in God's direct control over the world. That was the absolute bedrock of his Jewish worldview. And then you have this. In a letter he wrote to comfort a Christian nobleman, he's not quoting the Talmud, he's quoting the Roman Stoic philosopher Seneca. He was just as comfortable in the world of classical philosophy and humanist literature as he was in the world of the Bible.
It's like you see these 2 perfect halves of one incredible mind. He was a fierce, unwavering defender of Jewish tradition. But he was also the quintessential Renaissance man. He could quote Roman philosophers. He could negotiate statecraft. He could do it all.
Okay, so what did this completely unique mind actually produce? What was the lasting legacy that was forged in the fire of exile? Well, the answer is kind of shocking in how modern it is. It all started when he asked a question that, for his time, was just incredibly radical. It was a question that would shake the very foundations of how people read sacred texts.
See, for centuries, the unquestioned belief was that the prophets themselves wrote the books with their names on them. Samuel wrote the book of Samuel. Joshua wrote the book of Joshua. Simple. It was seen as direct, first-hand testimony.
But Abravanel, with his sharp literary and historical eye, he's reading this and he spots a problem. He sees phrases like, unto this day, and he thinks, wait a minute, how could Joshua write unto this day about something that just happened?
He argued this proves that a later editor, he thought it was the prophet Jeremiah, must have compiled these texts long after the events actually took place.
Now to us, that might seem kind of obvious, but in the 15th century, wow, that was an absolutely revolutionary idea. To treat the Bible not just as a divine revelation, but as a historical document that you could analyze. I mean, with that insight, he basically became one of the first pioneers of modern biblical criticism.
And his modern thinking didn't stop there. This part is truly astonishing. Here's a man who spent his entire life serving kings, and yet he argued that monarchy was actually an inferior form of government, just a concession to human weakness. He looked at the republics of Venice and Florence and called them upright states, a superior model because elected leaders and term limits stopped tyrants from rising. This was one of the first truly republican texts ever written by a major Jewish thinker. And his own final journey really reflects this conviction. After being exiled from Spain, he's forced to flee Naples during a French invasion. He eventually settles in Venice, and in this perfect, almost poetic twist of fate, his last major public act wasn't serving a king. It was using his incredible diplomatic skills to negotiate the spice trade on behalf of the Republic of Venice.
So, in the end, the man who lost all his worldly power found a much more permanent kind of influence. His money was taken, his status vanished overnight, but his ideas on history, on politics, on faith, they would echo for centuries to come.
And that leaves us with one last thing to think about. Abravanel's life really forces us to ask, in times of crisis and massive change, what's ultimately more powerful? A king's edict, which can shatter a world in an instant, or an exile's words, which can build a new one from the ashes?